Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of History After Hours. It is April 16th, 2020, and it's been a while. We have been quarantined. We've been teaching via Zoom, and we finally decided to get together and record a podcast. The podcast was interesting to get those guys' perspective on all the changes that have taken place here in the last week or so. If you don't know, History After Hours is a podcast that really focuses on looking at politics and current events through the lens of history. It is three history teachers, one ex-lawyer, and we always have a good time trying to analyze what has happened and what might be coming next. Of course, in this specific episode, since this is the first one we have recorded in a while, we focus, of course, on the virus, the federal government's response, the media's response. But the first part of the podcast, we basically talk about what it's like teaching digitally compared to the traditional classroom and how this might change permanently, at least partly. So it's kind of interesting to get, everybody's take on how all this is going. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges involved, but it's an interesting podcast. Once again, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter and all those places and YouTube. And we want to thank Abby Hanks, who is editing and producing this podcast. And so without further ado, I hope you enjoy the podcast. And we are live. Hello, gentlemen.
What's up?
How's it going?
So this is the first quarantined History After Hours podcast in history. It's the first one we've ever videoed. I want to talk first, and I'm going to get your opinion on teaching this way.
I'll give the
Pros,
date. So
cons.
What's today? The 16th?
Yes, today
16th,
is Thursday,
Yeah,
April 16th, 2020.
When we left, the last day of actual physical high school was March 13th.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when we left, none of us, we thought we'd probably be gone for a little bit. I think we all assumed that, but I didn't think the year. I thought a week or two.
No.
And now
Yeah.
it's, who knows? Yeah.
I was kind of hoping that with, we left the week before spring break and then we had spring break. And I thought, well, maybe, in the back of my head, the little positive, that one positive guy that lives in my head was like, well, maybe that's enough time for it all to calm down. Everybody else in my head was like, you're an idiot. Like,
He beat that guy to death
but-
with the virus.
Right. Yeah.
Nixon, how's it been
I mean,
teaching?
I'm just going to be really honest. I hate it, which is probably not the party line I'm supposed to put out. AP Gov, we're fine. We do Zoom. We have our discussions. I don't think they go in as much detail. Economics has been a nightmare. I've been trying to teach supply and demand by video and graphs, and it's been.
Wouldn't teaching that during, hoarding episodes be helpful? So that's real life experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's say everybody bought toilet paper all at once. What does that do to these?
And you try to sell it on eBay for $800 a roll.
Yeah, I made them track a good through the circular flow of the market, and 90% of them did toilet paper, and about the other 10% did hand sanitizer.
Are they still following like virtual stocks and stuff?
No, I told them to sell them off right before we left, but everybody had already lost money when we did that.
That's because most of Congress had already done that.
Yeah, they did that first and screwed us all over. But the kids were like, "This sucks. We lost money." I was like, I don't know what else to do with it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what teaching is. What makes this so much more difficult than being in the classroom? What's the biggest obstacle y'all are finding?
Well, for me, it's dwindling participation. At first I had kids, I mean, everybody was there, but maybe one or two. And then, but that would be hit or miss. Some days I had everybody, like all classes, everybody was there, present and accounted for, and we could roll. And then now that we've gone into this, a month or so, they're a little slower to log in, and they're a little slower to, if they're there at all. And I'm, busy trying to email people like, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And then in the middle of all that, this past week, because you faced this too, we had a big storm that came through during Easter and knocked out everybody's power, or, thousands of kids around here. And so can they get online or can they not? Is it just an excuse to sleep in? Oh, my power's out. Sorry. I can't verify that one way or the other. That's been recently, that's been my biggest challenge now is like, who's going to show up? I've got those hardcore dedicated kids that are going to be there, but some are like hit or miss now.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest. I think what we see with Facebook or being anonymous online, and a lot of that is kind of in this distance. There's less urgency. There's less attention being paid. Like when you have to physically go to school, sit in a desk, you're there, and you're physically, there's something about being physically in front of the teacher and the teacher being in front, and having that connection. Where this distance thing seems like it's not real pressing. It's not real important for me to, I can skip this. And plus I think their home environments vary so widely. It might be great for one introvert that has no siblings that can put their head down and learn and do, but you got 2 or 3 younger siblings going crazy. I think that's a lot of it.
I've got one student who was telling me that, it's her plus like 4 siblings and mom and dad are home trying to work as well. They're all trying to use, they've got limited number of devices, and some kids are having to use their phones, and that's burning through data, and they're all trying to use the same Wi-Fi, and that's slowing everything down. So they have to pick and choose whose day is it going to be, whose moment is it going to be, so that's tricky. And you never know what their capacity is going to be, even if they are home. And they are deviced, they've got they're ready to go, but maybe their internet slugs up,
And we're sitting a lot prettier than most schools. I mean, we've got 90+% or whatever it is, 99%.
Yeah, 99 is what
device
they say.
And internet.
That's great.
So there's some schools I'm sure not even hitting 50, and I don't know what you do in that situation in attendance. And it's so different. It's not what we were trained for. It's not what we learned about.
What bothers me too, not the kids, but I've heard adults talking about, well, teachers aren't working. Shut up, dude. We are working, and not just this, but the extra prep time to go into getting a lesson ready in this new digital environment. And then all the stuff before and after the fact, trying to make sure that you did contact with kids that weren't there, and how are you going to grade stuff now, and how are you going to do this effectively? Like we're putting in triple the effort. So you guys that are out there thinking that we're not doing our job, like you need to back up. Yeah, that's not a threat, but seriously, back up.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for me is, or at least with the younger kids, is how to help and correct when they're doing it wrong. And that's my biggest problem right now, because supply and demand for them is new. And when they get it wrong and then I can't correct it, not immediately, but within a reasonable, amount of, or if they don't show it and they turn in all their work and it's wrong, I don't have a good mechanism of breaking the habits that they're forming, and I don't have a good mechanism of getting the right information to them. That's my frustration at the moment.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think it's easy to correct them in class. You just go around and do it. Yeah. Now you have to literally look at what they did, email them, wait for a response, see if that clicked, email them back if it didn't. You just can't get that. There's so much in reading facial expressions, and you can't have a Zoom meeting all the time, So right. I'm wondering, what do y'all think about us doing this, ramping this digital learning, distance learning up? Do you think there's going to be any permanent changes that are going to come out of this, where governments realize there could be money saved in infrastructure by not, maybe students don't need to be in the building every day? I mean, and of course now teachers are getting trained this way. You think there's going to be anything that sticks, or do you think next year we just go back to the way it was?
Maybe a combination of things is what the future is going to hold. I mean, maybe this works really well for some students and maybe it works really well for some teachers. I wouldn't want to do this all the time. I mean, and I'm not trying to be just, hardcore traditionalist or whatever. Like, I got to be in a brick and mortar environment, but like you said a while ago, you lose so much of the dynamic, not just from a personable standpoint, but just like if I'm trying to tell a story, let's say, about what's going on, I'm trying to inform them about this, like my physical presence in a classroom helps me to get the point across sometimes, or the inflection of my voice, which is harder to do over the digital format. I'm not standing here saying that there's a certain amount of theatrics involved, but at the same time, being physically present does make a difference. And like you said, too, if I'm trying to grade something, or if I'm trying to evaluate in real time what they're doing, how they're getting it, how they're reacting to what I'm saying, I can't watch all those different faces on the screen the whole time. If we're doing a Zoom meeting, I can't, if a kid says, hey, can you look at this? Hand me the paper and let me look at it. Now I have to, email that to me, then I'll get back with you on that. And so the rate at which we can, the give and take has slowed down so much, that bogs the system maybe a little bit too. Group work is pretty much out of the question. We in the AP classes in particular, I love having them sit together in pods and in larger groups and discuss what they found and how they think and how they came up with that conclusion, and then challenge each other on that. And that's out the window.
Yeah.
Now, they can't even get together in their same house to do this. Everybody's in their own special little circumstance. And so it's tricky. And I'm not saying that we're not doing the best we can, but I would not want to do this all the time. I enjoy being in the classroom.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably going to be some combination. I think it's been useful for many teachers, including myself, to learn how to do this technology and, video lectures and maybe incorporate this into what I was doing. But there's no replacing putting students in groups and letting them hash out an idea, or challenging each other in the same room with a theory or a question, or there's just something, there's skills that they're developing that you can't do it as well online. But there might be a combination of something.
Yeah, I could see incorporating it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just going to be interesting to see if it fundamentally changes our school schedule or whatever,
I think it could. I'm with you that I don't want it to. The other thing that I'm seeing is for the kids who are getting it, or getting the information quickly, it's much harder to challenge or expand on. There's no enrichment over the standard, at least for economics. I had a kid asking me the other day by email, hey, that was a Latin term. Why don't we learn more Latin terms? Will you teach me more Latin terms? I'm just like, sure. How do I do this by email?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there at like 9 o'clock going, well, here's this, and it means this. And, you can have those conversations in an almost a real classroom, shame on me, in an actual classroom environment. And, you feed off the energy they're giving you and they're feeding off you. And it's just a completely different experience.
Yeah, I think that they're learning way more than just the content. I heard somebody on a podcast go, yeah, my child's done with all their schoolwork in like an hour and a half. So why are they at school for 6 hours? And I'm like, well, there's a lot more they're learning at school than just do this assignment, turn it in. I mean, that's what a lot of teachers are resorting to, is just,
what they'd had before this, though, where they'd had programs, for those kids that were in non-traditional situations, or they were trying to finish early or whatever. Here's this computer module. Go run through the module, and then you click the little buttons, and you've answered all the questions that we can ask you about what you've read, and move on to the next thing. And now you've learned. That is not the same thing. That is not what we're doing. That is, what we're doing is so deeply broad, deep and broad, and engaging, that you can't have that same type of content delivery or understanding. Like, you may have gone through a little module, but that does not mean that you actually know the content as deeply and well as you could if you've been sitting in a classroom with one of us.
Oh yeah. And it comes back to instant feedback, and it also comes back to just the back and forth right there live physically.
Yeah.
It's all the nuances that you just have to deal with when you're in a social setting rather than this distance thing.
Yeah, but and if you've got 6 classes, let's say, and an athletic period, so right, that makes the 7-period day. So if you've got 6 academic classes and you're through with whatever it is that they've given you to do in an hour and a half, you haven't done much and you haven't done it well.
Right. Yeah. You haven't thought about it. Like there's a difference between getting stuff accomplished and then being thoughtful. I try to keep putting that in my prompts is like, I need a thoughtful answer. Think about it. Don't just put something that works. Take it a step further. And you've seen the Zoom sessions with the kids. Half of them are not, they're outside, they're walking, they're in the car. It's like, how are they going to be able to focus on what I'm trying to deliver when I'm just a portion of their attention? Where in the classroom, you can get right in their face and go, "Hey, are you with me?" And but it's hard you can't reach through the screen, So
yeah. What are you, like 1/4 of an inch on their phone screen, and then you're going to be a big part of their life that day.
Yeah, and they're doing this. They're doing a lot of other things with the device. I'm just in the top left corner somewhere. So, okay, with the
thoughtful thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say the thoughtful thing is something I had to, just like the last 2 days, I had to talk with my kids about. Your responses are getting sloppy. They're getting overly simplistic. Think about it, please.
Full of thought.
You guys, you've put 30 seconds into this, and I can tell. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, what's their digital life like anyway? You click this, on to the next, sound bites, really quick TikTok video, you know what I'm saying? Like it's all brief. And so if now I'm a digital entity in their life, I feel that the tendency is going to be to want it to be over quickly, thought about it for a moment, let it go on to the next. And so it's going to generate less thoughtful responses if we keep having to do this over, obviously we're going to finish the school year this way, but if we have to start next school year with this, like, I don't know.
Or have 1 week at school and then the second round comes out and you're gone for a month. And at least we know the kids, right? I mean, imagine having to do this first day of school with kids you don't know. How do you get to know them?
My wife and I talked about this. How do you start kindergarten?
Right.
How do you start kindergarten? You've never been, now. Yeah.
Now, playing, maybe let's shift the perspective and play kind of devil's advocate to ourselves with all these problems. The alternate solution to this is nothing, or mailing them work, so there's no connection at all. So I'm glad at least we live in an age where this is a possibility. So we're comparing it with what we think is the ultimate way, but if this happened 10 years ago, it's no school. Then what do you do? Do they even graduate? How do you justify moving on to the next grade? Skilled math. Think about, like, at least the kids that want to learn have the opportunity. We give them the structure. They can go get it. And they do have visual contact with us at least a little. So I don't want to tear the whole thing down. And like I said, we're kind of at an advantage.
That's not what I meant ultimately. No. This is not preferable, but it's better than nothing. I give you that. Yeah. And
every time I hear AMI packets, I shudder. At least I don't have any kids on an AMI packet, but
I have kids that were telling me, because I'm pretty much trying to run class as normally as I can, some sort of sense of some standard that we've had before,
right?
Especially with my younger students, like they're a little less likely to jump out on their own and do it, whereas juniors and seniors might be more capable. And I actually asked them, I'm like, is this working for you? Do you like this? And they're like, yeah, it gives us, we feel better having that moment, at least it kind of reminds us of what we had before. So I think that it can evolve over time, I suppose, but I think that they are at least appreciative of the effort that we're giving.
I think so. And, like you said, the upper level kids are going to have an easier time with this. I mean, it is it's not a coincidence that this distance learning started with college level, and filtered into the high school, but because they can manage their time. But man, being a junior high or even ninth grade, 8th grade and on down, I don't know how, it's the parents that have to really step in for anything to happen with that age group. And I see it with my wife and my children.
I feel bad for the parents too, man, because they're not trained teachers, most of them, and now they're having to try to figure out how to help a kid. Let's say that you are using AMI packets, maybe the school has to do that. Then now it's actually on the parents, and they're if they're going to work, then they've got limited time that they can spend with the kid trying to help them if they struggle. If they are not going to work, they've got those extra pressures of how are we going to make ends meet, and now you got to stop whatever you were doing in your life to maybe try to get that going to try to help the kid. And so I can't, I mean, my kids are up and out of the house. Right. And so I don't have, it's just me and my wife that we worry about each other and we help support each other. But I can't imagine having little kids in the house right now, trying to work through some of these things, or sharing resources, or trying to teach them if I didn't know how,
Yeah. I mean, we have our 3 kids, and, me and Cindy, we're both teachers, so we get it, so when I say Google Classroom, everybody in the house knows what I'm talking about. But some of these parents, Google what classroom? That's, they don't know even the basic, vernacular that we use in education. I can't imagine, and some of them are trying to do 7th grade math, and they're like, I haven't seen this in 30 years. I would probably be one of them. But, it is what it is. And I think, I think there's going to be some good to come out of this, as long as we can go back to some sense of the advantages we get with one-on-one teaching and, in classroom teaching. I do think this gives teachers a little bit of extra tools. Maybe they've had to think outside their box for the first time. I mean, me included. You get a 20-year in teacher like me, it's hard to come up, but this has helped a little bit. I now feel comfortable at recording lectures and podcasts and all the stuff. I mean, I was doing some of that, but let's talk about what everybody wants us to talk about, which is this virus thing. I don't know if y'all have heard this blurb in the news, but apparently there's a virus. So let me just tee it up for you. Just tee it up for you. Start tracing let's go back to January when we started hearing the reports. What's your opinion on how things have went here versus other countries versus what we know now versus what we knew? Just give me your just basic thoughts on this, how this has progressed. Using profanity.
That makes it easier.
There's a portion of every year where I teach Black Plague, and one of the things that we talk about, even before that, we talk about the faltering of systems. Let's say Rome, for example, since a lot of people, and one of the things I really harp on is, what would you do if every system that you relied on no longer functioned? How long would it take before people? How long, how would the stress level go? And one of the weird examples that I use is, what would your reaction be if the superintendent came, and broadcast and said, "Hey, you kids don't have to go to school tomorrow," and they're like, "Yay!" And then I'm like, "Well, what if he came on the next day, snow day? What if it came on the next day and he's like, okay, we're not gonna be back for a week," and they're like, okay, and I was like, well, what if he came back on and said, okay, we're done for the year, and they're like, well, that would be terrible. And then so they start thinking about why, so you're relying on yourself for your education, essentially, in maybe in that particular case. I said, okay, well, what if you never went back and where you left is all you ever get? And let's say that the other systems that you rely on are gone too, and the internet breaks down and you can't look stuff up, and your electricity goes off, and the gasoline pumps don't work, and there's no delivery to the, and so now, and I teach that every single year, and then we all go, "Whoa, we're glad that'll never happen." Mm-hmm. And now we're sort of facing some of those things, and I hear those same sort of mocking gestures that I had in the past come back to haunt me a little bit. It's like this weird karma thing, Oh
yeah. On this very podcast, over the past couple years at least, we have mentioned a super flu or a virus that could spread to really shock us into reality. And of course, this could be the calm before a storm. There could be something down the road that is way worse. This is bad. And we didn't think this was going to happen. I'm teaching, Ronald Reagan and the collapse of the Soviet Union. And, you know, I ask the kids, I like, how long do you think America's going to keep going under our current constitution, under our government? And, you know, most of them 100 years at least, you know, whatever. If you would have asked people in 1985 how much longer the Soviet Union's going to be around, they would probably, 100 years, it's going to go on for, and then in 7 years, it's gone. It's collapsed, and revolutions and all that. Things change so quickly. And, you know, humans are so adaptable. It's like when the electricity goes off, in every room you go in for the next 10 hours, you're flipping the lights. Oh, crap. I forgot. Oh, crap. Everybody does it because we're so adaptable. And we just got used to the way things were, not even thinking that things could shift. And I think this really has shaken up. Might be a blessing in disguise.
Well, from a preparedness standpoint, yeah. And I'm glad that we've got the ability to continue to deliver, you know,
right,
in whatever capacity this is and however long it lasts. Like with this, I mean, I don't want to do it this way forever, but we could. I mean, I could do what I do in this way. It's not as effective, but it works. All right. So, but back to the original question then was like, what do you think about the virus? Like when I first started hearing the reports, I'm like, oh, that sucks. And I was thinking SARS, you know. Yeah,
we'll get a hold of this thing.
It's regionalized, it's localized. They'll take care of it, and then next thing you know, it starts you start hearing reports in other places, and then you're taking it more seriously because people are, you know, there were people that were dying within a certain, you know, quickly within a number of days. And I remember my mother, who's 76. She said, "Oh, well, I heard about this thing, and they're calling it the angel of death for old people." And she was like freaking out because she's like, old people, you know. And so she's like, "Well, I'm glad it's not over here." And I'm like, well, and then you start pondering the what ifs. And then what was the first case here, not in Arkansas, but I mean in the United States, was in February. Yeah. Up in Washington.
Like
early February. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I started watching that and I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, the worst case scenarios kept playing in my head, but there's part of me that just was like, it can't really be that bad, could it? It couldn't really go down those paths, could it? But then when you start stacking up bodies, then we knew pretty quickly. It's like, yeah, like here it comes, like this is real. And even when we ended school, you know, March 13th, well, not ended, but we left the building March 13th. There were part of me that was like, we might not be back, you know. But I still held out hope. There's that weird optimist, like I said before. It was like, yeah, it's gonna be okay. But just every day seems to reinforce the idea that this is so very different, and so many people still aren't taking it seriously, which is bizarre to me. You know?
Yeah, I think probably mid-February was the first time I went, yeah, I think this could be something. I think it could be more serious than what we're thinking. But I'm kind of like you. You're just like, yeah, back of your head. And I think by the end of February, I was like, maybe I should start thinking about, I don't know, supplies at home. So I don't know. I don't think I ever really resigned myself to what, I don't even know if I am resigned to it now, what's happening. But I didn't think we'd be out, at least school-wise, for the rest of the year. So it's.
What do you think the first time you went to the store and there were like certain shelves that were just empty? Like that kind of freaked me out. Yeah. That was an attention getter. I'm like, wait, people are hoarding.
Yeah.
You know, there weren't any canned goods. I mean, everybody obviously toilet paper, but canned goods, like there were no beans and then rice and all that stuff. And I'm like, wait.
I think the first real shock to me was it's probably about a week before that, when I think we were still in school. Because my kids talked about it. When hand sanitizer and masks were selling on eBay for $50, $60, $70 a box. I think that was my first time going, yeah, I think this could be bad. And it's part panic and then part, you know, I hate to call people opportunists, but you know, there are some. So part of me was still going, yeah, it could be bad. And then the other part of me going, but it's probably not going to be.
Yeah, you're right. That was the first thing that they ran out of seemingly was hand sanitizer and like handy wipes. I remember somebody, I guess I was on Facebook or something, and somebody had been to the store. They're like, well, you know, Walmart's out of handy wipes. And then I was like, huh. And then, you know, the next day it was all the rest of it, you know, or not the next day, but, you know, shortly after.
What was that guy that got in trouble for hoarding or buying a bunch of hand sanitizer or something before all this went down?
I'm making my economics kids. New York Times. I think this is the same guy. Did a piece on him. He hoarded 17,700 bottles of hand sanitizer and then other things, and then just price gouged people. And so I'm making my kids. It's like a DBQ setup, analyzing supply and demand with it, because now it's real.
And he got in pretty bad trouble for this, right? Didn't he get in trouble for this?
Yeah, I mean, there's been several people, but this guy, the one in Kentucky, if that's what you're talking about, he ended up donating quite a bit of his. But after, it's funny because if you read the article, he's like, I don't want to be the guy on the front page of the paper who ripped everybody off.
Yeah,
well, buddy, that's what happened.
Part of me kind of respects the guy, right? You know, he's the crazy guy that everybody's making fun of. He's hoarding all this hand. Oh, one day it's going to pay off, buddy. And then all of a sudden he's a hero. I called it. I knew it. And then he gets in trouble. So I don't know. Let's think. As far as the response, you know, it got real for me when I had to cancel my Spain trip. That weekend where I had to seriously go, oh, am I going to cancel our spring break trip? And then, of course, it got real. And then everything kind of got shut down. But let's talk about, I mean, look, we can say what we want to about Arkansas. We're in a different situation than a lot of states. And but, you know, if you're in New York or California, some of these big cities, you're having a whole different thing. But one unifying thing would be the federal government's response. Let's grade it. How I mean, given what your experience is with life, what you know about media and science, and where are we at with the federal government's response? What were some of the big mistakes besides electing Trump in 2016?
You know, it's hard for me because I'm, as you all know, definitely not a Trump fan. My problem with the government response has been the half truths, and sometimes not even half truths, just the lies about it, the not taking it seriously. The president saying, "Well, we have 17 cases, and then there will be 0." On what planet, man? I don't. I just so. For me, I almost have to separate it. Like the federal government response, like CDC, and those people, I think, have done a pretty decent job. The president, on the other hand, has been horrendous.
Well, it's interesting at his pep rally, pep conferences, ratings, those things that he's so concerned with. He'll say something so, like you just said, oh, we have 15 cases. Tomorrow it'll be go down to nearly none. He just says this, just like he said, antibiotics used to solve everything, but now they're smart. You know, no, antibiotics have never solved viruses. They only work on bacteria. So he's just saying nonsense. But you have the scientist right beside him who completely contradicts him within 10 minutes. And then he'll contradict him. And it's like, are they on the same team or not? It's weird. And when he started bragging about his Facebook numbers, because, you know, we're all thinking we're all going to die. So yes, we're paying attention. But he's acting like it's his rating. I was like, wow, this is a whole nother level that I didn't think it could go to as people are dying.
Let's back up to the fact that in years past, he cut and very proudly cut funding from the response teams, that their entire, you know, budget was eliminated. People's jobs were eliminated. They're downsizing government, which, you know, you can argue about downsizing government, but your pandemic response team. And they asked him at the time, there's video of them asking him at the time, do you think this is a good idea? And he goes, oh, it's going to be fine. If anything happens, we'll just gather people back up and it'll be great. We'll get all the best people, you know, the routine. Mm-hmm. So defunding that and then putting cronies in places, you know, whatever the cronyism, nepotism that he's been so brilliantly famous for. But then now I agree with you, the misrepresentation of what's going on, which is echoed in other people then too across the country, when he's like, well, you know, masks are probably a good idea, but I'm not going to wear one. Well, then nobody takes it seriously. Yeah. That's in his sort of camp or leans in his direction. And so you see that echoed out in society. And we'll go out if I have to, you know, of course we mask up and, you know, I try to avoid going if I have to, unless I absolutely have to, but if we go, but there's always people going, I can't believe you're wearing a mask. What? And I'm like, wait, okay, so you're not even taking any precautions just in case. You can't see this thing. You don't know who has it. You can't, right? It spreads, It's like the governor in Kentucky. Like, we didn't know it spread human to human. Well, everybody's known that for a month. Where were you?
We did.
And the CDC's in Atlanta. But why? How is that a surprise to you, sir? But anyway.
Well, Trump saying he didn't think there was a problem with testing. I haven't heard anything about testing. This was weeks after.
If you want to test, you can get a test. None of that was true. It's still not true.
And then he talked to the governors 2 weeks later and said, I haven't heard much about testing, or y'all still having trouble getting tests. I was like, that's the whole point, because we don't know how many people got this thing.
It doesn't matter day to day what he says, because it's going to be different tomorrow. And it's like there's this weird reset button that happens sometimes in the same conversation. He'll just ignore exactly what he said a while ago and go into something new. But
it's the same with everything. Why are we so surprised? Maybe just because it's more appalling.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
But the testing thing really. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was that the biggest thing for me, though, has been when he enacts the wartime power. What's the thing called where you can force? What's that called?
Yeah, Defense Production Act.
Defense Production. Okay, so he was slow to even. I mean, he said he's gonna do it, but then he doesn't actually do it. Right? It's just kind of in words only. And then he sort of does some things. But my biggest problem with all of that is making the states compete with each other for the product that is being produced or accrued from other places and brought in, making a small state like ours compete with New York and California and Michigan and whomever, Florida, and then all of them bid against each other and drive that price up. Like, who is that benefiting? Somebody must be, or they wouldn't be doing it that way. He refused to federalize that aspect of it, and then and price control. It's a federal gouging program that he's got going on. Somebody's making money, and I wonder if he's not in bed with them somehow. Same thing with the whole let's push this malaria drug. Like, he's had connections through his lawyers and other people with the people that are manufacturing this malaria drug, and now you're making them rich because the government just ordered a butt ton of it. And so it just seems like there's this dastardly behind the scenes, let's milk money out of this scenario as best we can for certain people while everybody else is sort of waiting for help. And while I'm on a roll, this whole bailout of the American people with the $1,200 thing, Steve Mnuchin was on TV this morning, the Treasury Secretary, saying that he doesn't see why $1,200 couldn't last people 10 months. 10 months. $1,200. It's $120 a month. Like, that's improving your life. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to feed my kids? I've lost my job. Am I getting my unemployment if I filed for it? I did file for it. Did you get it? Well, maybe. Did I get everything I was expecting? Maybe not. You can pay taxes out of that too. Like, this is such total. It's a clown show, spotlighting the main clown, and then but while the spotlight's on him, there's stupid crap going on behind the scenes that are actually hurting people, most people in this country. And it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. The states shouldn't have to compete, and then you don't have to drive that price up. It's just ridiculous. Sorry.
Yeah, and the hurting of people is what really pisses me off the most, because on the testing thing, anybody who wants a test can get a test. That was crap. We knew that. But then the people who needed testing, he's on TV going, oh, well, we have a 17-minute test and we have a 5-minute test. And, they're parading the oil and gas executives in and out of the Oval Office. Oh, they got tested in 15 minutes. But meanwhile, people in actual emergency situations aren't getting tested. Hospital workers, medical workers, even people who were in the hospital, because like my dad had to have a heart procedure done, and they had to test him when he was leaving because he got a cough, long story short, but he had to wait 4 days to get the test results back, and they're like, just go home. Are you kidding me?
Oh man.
The lies have what's gotten me.
With the competing, making the states compete. Also, if you're a governor who has been critical of Trump, he might just withhold stuff altogether. So you have you have this thing where you have to, I've got to kiss his to get some stuff.
That too. And it was like, oh, well, it depends on how nice they were to me. Your governor should have been nicer to me. That's why you're all dead. Really?
Okay. Now, let me just, I've always said as a U.S. history teacher, the president is the focal point of any federal government of any administration has the most power. Usually a president is, given too much credit or too much blame. It does seem like the media has, in part, turned in to the thing. Before Trump, you didn't hear fake news very much. He kind of helped popularize that. He would say he invented the word fake, but that's neither here nor there. I wonder how much of the news has actually become fake news. Like, it really is difficult to wade through the politics in the media now, because they're not perfect either, and they're wanting to get Trump, or they're wanting to show that he's perfect. It has become very difficult to find true unspun facts. Some seem more legit than others, just the way they present material, but you can still tell when they're trying to get him, or, what do y'all think about the media's job or in all of this? How do you wrap your heads around that?
Well, we've been talking, or I've been talking about it in government for years, this 24-hour news cycle. Cable TV invented it, and then internet perfected it. And so it's all click-driven, or it's all ratings-driven. And in times like this, it really bites us in the butt, because I feel like there's a rush to print. There's a rush to tweet. There's a rush to, publish the article. And if you watch the briefings, that are given from the White House each day, you can sort of see it as it happens on Twitter. They will take it and quote and then run with it. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but there is so much urgency and the desire to be the first or to break a story that I do worry about vetting sources and actual journalism and whether it exists at the moment.
The one thing that I like is that when he's giving his daily briefings, that more and more people are willing to go, well, that's really not true. Where did you hear that? In real time, and he'll react. And or obviously he's gonna be mad at them, and maybe
he gets upset. That's
maybe
very
they're baiting a
disrespectful.
little bit, but at the same time, no, like what you just said is false. So now what? So I like what media's job to me ultimately would be, one of their jobs is to fact check, and to call out people in authority, but not and I hate to use the Sarah Palin gotcha, kind of phrasing, but at the same time, that's not why you're there. You're there to be an honest critique of any administration. So I think that part is still there, but it's also, like you said, Nixon, clouded up in ratings driven stuff and trying to be the first to scoop it out. You remember the Don Henley song "Dirty Laundry"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting when people die. Here it is. The world seems like it's on fire, and some outlets are only focusing on that. And so part of what that does is, you need to know some of the realities that are going on. Let's say the hotspots like New York, that has, New York itself is passing certain countries in their death rates.
Right.
Well, to understand that that's happening is important. To understand that their hospitals in certain areas are overloaded. But the idea that every hospital across the nation and every healthcare worker across the nation is facing the same kind of situation, and that, what I'm saying? And not that it couldn't be that, you need to be aware of circumstances, but to think that everything is on fire, like, I don't like those types of reporting either. It's inflammatory, not to be punny, but it's inflammatory journalism, and it doesn't serve any real good purpose other than to drive ratings, because again, fire gets people's attention, right?
Yeah, I wonder if they're in a dying platform with network. I wonder if more and more Americans are going to have to turn to third-party filters. We obviously view everything with a historical bend or a legal bend, but there's people that can filter through a lot of this, but they're by themselves on a podcast somewhere. They're not part of a network, because networks need money, they need clicks. But single-party, third-party sources, maybe they can be a little more honest. I don't know. I think we're in the middle of that evolution, going from this network cable 24-hour click to some sort of filter.
Those people that sit out there like ham operators talking about, Area 51, like there's no governing of that either. And so
that's
part
scary.
Of the press's ultimate job too is to self-govern.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we're seeing that in all cases, but I know that we're seeing it in a lot. And I saw, I think about Chris Wallace on Fox, and how he's been critical of the president in certain ways, and then watching all the talking heads around him jump on him like he's not a real journalist. Like that's an interesting moment, and it's a self-check moment. So if he doesn't hold the company line, and he says something that's mildly critical, even in some cases very critical of the response in this particular storyline, then people are like, oh, I knew you're a secret Democrat or whatever, like he's a journalist. And so, but we need more people who are willing to, and I don't know how you do that and not lose your job necessarily,
Well, at the end of the day, it falls on the American to try to sift through some of the BS and to.
Yeah, but we're either busy or too lazy.
Exactly.
A lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and hopefully we have more people like Chris Wallace that go rogue, that you trust somebody like that. But once again, that's a very scary thing, because a lot of people trust Sean Hannity to deliver the news. And, so I don't know.
There's not a Walter Cronkite of this era.
No, and they're not held accountable to be. There's no loss of job if you tell a lie, or if you report a story that's not well sourced. There's no consequence, just like for the president.
I tend to watch for reporting, and then when it starts to go into opinion, then that you've lost. Right, it's no longer journalism at that point. It's just opinion, tabloid kind of stuff almost, if you're not careful, right?
Well, I tell the students, and y'all say the same thing, the best thing to do now is, if you're not sure, look at a multitude of, look at right wing, look at left wing, look at some that's considered the center, and maybe you can filter some truth out of that. I want to spend our last little 5 minutes here talking about the summer, maybe into the fall, and specifically the election. I don't know if y'all know this, but there's a presidential election coming up. And if people can't physically go vote, and if they mail ballots or whatever they're going to do, so what do y'all think about the presidential race, Biden versus Trump, the senior citizens going at it, pumped up full of whatever medicine they got them on to keep them going? What do you think about the presidential race?
Well, I did have a student wanted me to ask you guys what you thought if the DNC tried to force Bernie out. So I'll throw that out there in a second. But the presidential race is an afterthought at the moment, which is scary to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what's going to happen if we try to vote by mail or by other means, because we saw what happened in was it Wisconsin the other day? All my news is running together, where the Supreme Court basically said, "Yeah, go vote in the plague." They didn't say
saw
that.
And then shut it down after everybody voted.
Essentially go.
Wasn't the biggest controversy in that they didn't allow extra time for mail-in ballots?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the whole Donald Trump and mail-in ballots are corrupt. They're more fraudulent. They're not statistically.
Didn't he vote by mail though?
He did.
Did he actually cast a mail-in ballot?
He did in the Republican primary in Florida. He most certainly did.
Nothing matters anymore.
And then he went on Twitter and everywhere and said they're fraudulent. I don't know what the race is going to look like. I don't know who's going to win. And I think it's going to determine, or how it will be determined, is how we come out of this coronavirus mess, if we come out of it by the election. And how the economy is doing at that point.
To answer your student's question, I don't think that 2020 Bernie was forced out by the DNC. I think 2016 Bernie was.
Yeah,
it's kind of weird how Trump's approval rating has also went up. Americans, we love to support the president when things go down, like after 9/11, after any event. So his approval rating is going up. I kind of want to end. I want your thoughts on this, because one of the things that we've been saying really is how much Trump acts like a dictator, how he loves to be loved, admires all this. One strange thing is how he's really pushed away response. He could have done what they've done in other countries and just taken control of this whole thing. it kind of goes counter to what the pattern we've seen with him. He hasn't tried to take over. It's the governors, it's the states.
That's because it's going poorly.
I think that's right.
If it was going really, really well, it's all credit and no blame. That's his pattern, and it's his shtick, and we're not surprised by that. And so I think that's what it is.
I also think it's his ignorance of our system of government, because a couple of days ago he said, I have total power over this. The governors yield to me, essentially. And everybody goes, no. that's not how this works.
Especially conservatives. Especially conservatives are going, no. That's
the hypocrisy. I mean, that's just going to take me down a different rabbit hole, because the stimulus is mostly demand side Keynesian, which the Republicans are supposed to be against, but that's a different story.
What did you think about? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. It's the hypocrisy of it all. I think he would be an authoritarian if he, one, knew how, and two, could. I don't think he can do either.
It's incompetence again.
To go along with that, what do you think about the people protesting yesterday in Michigan and Florida and Georgia and South Carolina? We will not self-isolate. We will not quarantine. Those people, did you see all that? Like they're marching the streets, and they blocked up the Capitol avenues in and around Michigan, and get rid of the governor and all that stuff. And I mean,
tell them to go to Sweden where they're doing that. It's not working out well for Sweden.
Yeah, I saw that. Like they were like,
they're just ignoring every other country, and they're just going to try to do the herd mentality and try to get that, get the antibodies as quickly as possible, even though their death rates are like third in the world now. It's like
it's jumping up now. Yeah. So per capita, right?
Right.
Okay. So we that's something else we could talk about too, real quick. And I know that, we don't want to drag this out too long, but we've got more death rates. Like we own more than a quarter of the infections, and 30,000 deaths, almost 31 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's okay for all you people that are like, this is the flu. No, it's not. Like we've been doing this like a month and a half, maybe 2 months now. Yeah. 2 months, and we got 30,000 deaths. This ain't the flu. Yeah. When you go back and look at the flu rates of death, and yeah, they can be high, but that's over a 12-month period. Like pay attention to that.
Yeah. And we have a vaccination for that. We don't have,
we're losing 1,000 people a day, sometimes more. Pay attention.
We have tests for the flu. Yeah. That's kind of, I think part of the fear of this whole thing was the unknown. We didn't know who had it. We still don't. But I could have it right now and not know it.
All these protesters out there yesterday saying and they're not social distancing, and they're all jammed up together and they're protesting. And they were like, I'm not afraid. I need to go back to work. And I get the financial reality. Yeah. Work. I get that. And I get that. To me, this was two things. It was an echoing of the president's nonchalance about this. Oh, it's not really that big a deal. Oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, it's a hoax. And that's still, those bells are still ringing in people's heads. And then secondly, the desperation that some people are already feeling, because $1,200 freaking a month is not going to get it, or $1,200 for 10 months is not going to get it for sure. And so, so I don't know where it goes from here.
And they're dragging this out by doing this stuff, by protesting. Literally, I mean, look, I do think we need a plan to reopen the economy. I think it has to be reopened, or we're all going down. But this whole protesting stuff, it's just spreading the virus and elongating, what could be a lot shorter.
Which is why he's so frustrating when he mocks it or doesn't take it seriously.
April 1st.
Or says, I'm not going to wear a mask. I mean, because they're hearing that and they're parroting it.
Yeah. It's just like them saying it was a hoax at first. It's just.
Do you think that we open back up through the summer? In graduated elements, like here in these spots where it's.
I have a feeling we're going to be opening gradually, like you said, certain aspects of the economy. But you think about the NFL, 100,000 people in a stadium. I don't know that we can do that unless we figure out some sort of alternative testing system.
Somebody suggested sports in an arena with no people, no spectators, just the players themselves. Right, the owners would have to give up some sort of revenue package to the players to get them out there. But then people would have something if you're in quarantine. Sports is a big part of people's lives. I get that. and it would give them something to focus on, maybe rather than some of the troubles they are facing. But could you get that? Is that something that's possible? Major League Baseball, basketball, football, played with no spectators like at all.
I think there's going to be some permanent changes come out of this. I don't know that we ever go back to the way it was. I think there's going to be some slight changes. Now, we might get close to what it was, but I think there's going to be some people thinking outside the box, worried about the next pandemic, coming up with alternate ways where you don't have all these crowded.
Not until there's a vaccine, for sure.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm hopeful that, we'll be back at school in August and we can talk about the presidential race and we can have these face-to-face meetings. But I'm not taking anything for granted now.
We can get down to the coffee shop and hang out.
Yeah, collective coffee on Thursdays. All right, guys. Hey, I enjoyed it. I'm glad to see you guys and go through this and get your opinions on this. And this is History After Hours. Thank you very much.